All right, launch control, foot on the brake. Jesus Christ! Sometimes the best things in life don't ever really have to change as time goes on. Think about the piano, the pizza slice, and the Porsche 911. What happens when you want a lightweight, rear-engine sports car that can hang with the best of them? Well, the go-to response for that is usually a GT3, but I'm not sure if you've checked on GT3 prices lately. They're $250,000, and that's why Porsche will sell you this for about half the price. And today's video is sponsored by Brilliant.org, which is one of the best ways to learn math, data science, and computer science interactively online. We will get into that a bit more later, but for now, just know that Brilliant, I love you, dog. The 911 Carrera T is the answer to those who want a purist 911 driving experience without going for something like a GTS model or a GT3, which can set you back around 200 grand easily. This Carrera T model is getting you things like lighter weight glass, rear seat deletion, reduced sound deadening, rear axle steering, and a handful of other bits to make this one of the most driver-focused Porsche models you can buy today. The first 911 T came to be nearly 60 years ago as Porsche wanted to build the lightest weight 911 they possibly could. The T in 911 actually stands for touring, but the first 911 T was actually used to compete in the 1968 Monte Carlo Rally, where Porsche used the 911 T to secure their first victory. And apparently Porsche secured this victory because spectators shoveled some snow onto the road, which caused the Alpine cars they were competing with to spin out and lose a wheel, which is kind of messed up, but also kind of hilarious. Like, they really got played. Either way, the 911 T, or the Carrera T, has been a competitive performance model since the very beginning. Like I said in the beginning, the 911 hasn't really changed much design-wise since it was created over 60 years ago. It looks as good as it ever has. The only real consistent change with the 911 over the years has been the size. We've kind of seen this evolution with the 911 where it's gone from a genuine sports car size to more of a super sporty GT. For example, the 2000's 996 model 911 was barely over 2,900 pounds, whereas this example, the Carrera T, is over 3,300 pounds, or 3,200 if you opt for the manual spec. So yeah, it's bigger and heavier now than it ever has been, but still, 3,300 pounds puts the Carrera T in a weight class of cars like the McLaren Artura, the Lamborghini Huracan Evo, and the Ferrari Daytona SP3. Those are all supercars and a hypercar with price tags to match. The Carrera T costs a fraction of that. All of the Carrera T exterior features that come as standard include Carrera T badging, 20 and 21-inch wheels painted in titanium gray, mirror covers, and the Porsche logo painted in agate gray, and gloss black exhaust pipes. And this GT Silver spec makes for a killer exterior if you ask me. You can opt for something a bit more wild like a Ruby Star Neo for a couple extra grand, but this GT Silver definitely screams more classic Porsche to me. The Porsche interior experience has always kind of been what you want to make of it. Like, if you wanted an ultra premium luxury experience on the inside, you could tick all the little option boxes you want and spend another 100 grand in the process. But what we have here with this Carrera T spec is a lot more base model-esque. You don't have all the full extended leather or the Porsche race text, but even still, you're working with a very premium feeling interior overall. The thing that Porsche does the best with their interiors is make the things that you use all the time but aren't necessarily flashy items in the interior feel very good to use. For example, the window switches have this super clicky tactile feel to them that's just so satisfying, and same thing with the climate controls in the center console area. Most of everything in here just feels very good to touch. The 992 generation also comes with a nearly completely digitized gauge cluster. The only element that remains analog is the rev counter, and I'm honestly a big fan of the way Porsche's done this gauge cluster. All of the useful information is very accessible, it's designed well, and still very much fits the Porsche aesthetic. They've done a great job with it. There are two things that don't feel very premium to me with this interior experience: the sound system and the backup camera. Sound system first. This is, unfortunately, one of the worst, if not the worst sound system I've reviewed in any car I've tested this year, hands down. And I've tested cars from a price range of $25,000 to over 200 grand. This is very much sitting at the bottom of the list for me. Because nearly every other aspect of this 911 is so good, it almost actively annoys me how bad this sound system is. And keep in mind, this is the very base model sound system you can get. You can upgrade to a higher end Bose system or a Bowers & Wilkins system, I believe. I would highly recommend going for one of those two options because, man, it is just bad. Like, it's just tinny, there's no dynamic range, and it doesn't even get that loud, quite honestly. A part of the subpar sound system might have something to do with the lack of sound dampening in this Carrera T, but it's just pretty awful for a luxury sports car. The backup camera is also pretty meh. It's certainly more helpful than not having one, but the focal length of the lens makes it look very distorted and weird. It kind of looks like you're wearing drunk goggles if you've ever put those on. But other than that, this interior rocks, and I'm a huge fan of the experience of being in here.
So you can probably understand by now that Porsche engineers are very smart, but I know a way that they could become brilliant.
Brilliant.org is the best way to learn the maths and the computer sciences and engineerings interactively. Brilliant has a beautifully designed website with thousands of lessons that can teach you the basics of math, AI, data science, neural networks, and much more. And not just the basics, you can do the more advanced stuff too when you get to that level. I love Brilliant.org because I'm not brilliant, but thanks to Brilliant, I can take fun engineering lessons that allows me to learn more about the stuff I try to tell you about. And with my busy schedule, Brilliant fits perfectly into my day, like any man and a Porsche 911. It's one of the most effective and personable ways to learn. Trust me, dog. The Porsche GT3 having a 6-cylinder engine isn't what makes the car cool. It's about how that flat 6 engine makes you feel, just like the knowledge. It ain't about getting the knowledge, it's about how having the knowledge makes you feel. Knowledge. You want to achieve your goals, you want to be the best student you can be, you want to have the biggest of brains, well, get Brilliant. You can try it for free for a full 30 days using my special link in the description below, or just visit brilliant.org/carswithmiles. And the first 200 people to sign up using that link will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Do it now. Don't be like me and not be brilliant, even though I'm trying to get brilliant through brilliant.org. Go to brilliant.org right now. Now, back to the video. Porsche is one of those few brands that knows how to make a 380 horsepower car feel like a 500 horsepower car. And sure, the Carrera T isn't as punchy as cars like the BMW M2 or the Jaguar F-Type R, but this car is an absolute riot to drive, and that's because of the lightweight strategy that Porsche has taken when developing this car. And I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. I don't think you're gonna get in this car and be yearning for more horsepower. I'm sure as hell having fun. 3-liter flat 6 in this car is as good as it's ever been. It's making 380 horsepower and 331 pound-feet of torque in this Carrera T. So it's not as raw sounding as the naturally aspirated 911 GT3 or as punchy as the higher powered turbocharged GTS and Turbo S models. But you still get a lot of that raw mechanical sound with the sound deadening removed in this Carrera T model. And the power band is also really wide in the lower gear, specifically 1st through 3rd gear. Before you hit 5th, you'll find yourself well into the triple-digit speeds if you want to, in Mexico, of course. The base model Carrera, which is heavier than this Carrera T, can do 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds with the dual clutch automatic transmission, and this car is lighter, so you could expect very similar numbers to that. And I think it's fair to say that 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds puts the Carrera T in near supercar territory. That's practically the equivalent of a lot of all-wheel drive electric cars with similar or even more power than this car. This is a 400 or less than 400 horsepower rear-wheel drive 6-cylinder car that can keep up with electric cars in terms of acceleration. That's the Porsche magic. There are two secret weapons with this Carrera T, and those are rear axle steer and Porsche Torque Vectoring Plus. These are two options for the car that are highly effective for low speed and high speed cornering and turning. Torque Vectoring Plus is sending power to the outside wheels while reducing power for the inner wheels when taking a corner to allow the car to glide through a bend more effectively. And when you're ready to accelerate out of the bend, the electronic differential is stabilizing the chassis to put down the most amount of power to the road that you can possibly get. Rear axle steering is pretty self-explanatory. At low speeds, the rear wheels turn in the opposite direction as the front wheels for increased maneuverability, and this is useful for getting out of parking spots with a tighter turning circle. But when driving at higher speeds, the rear wheels will turn in the same direction, allowing the car to feel a bit more agile and maneuverable. It's more or less a virtual wheelbase extension, and with those elements combined with a rear engine and rear-wheel drive setup, this car is an absolute blast. There are a handful of cars you can buy with both of those features. There are Mercedes EVs with rear axle steering, and you can actually buy a run-of-the-mill Hyundai with torque vectoring. But what sets the Porsche apart from all of those vehicles is the feedback. Porsche is just really good at making you feel everything that's going on with the chassis. So when you combine the torque vectoring and the rear axle steering, it makes for just a beautiful handling experience for a car that weighs over 3,000 pounds. Steering feel in the Carrera T is also excellent. It's not too light, but also not too heavy either. And in combination with the steering feel and the Pirelli P0 tires, you're getting a lot of feedback and communication with the road. In fact, it might be a bit too much communication and feedback with the road for some. While the Carrera T is an excellent performance car, it might not be the best option for someone who wants to drive this multiple times a week in an area with bad pavement, aka most of New York and New Jersey. Driving this car in a city or over roads with uneven pavement and bumps, especially in sport suspension, can be very rough, to be honest. But realistically, if you can afford one of these, you've likely got a second car anyway. I think it's just good to point out that this is no Panamera in terms of the ride quality. You're definitely sacrificing a lot of the capability for daily ability. Is that a worthy sacrifice? Well, kind of up to you. This base Carrera sounds so much better than the turbo if you ask me. I think the reduced sound deadening just does a lot for giving you that raw engine sound that I feel like the larger displacement turbo just doesn't quite give you a lot of the time. But I think some people may find the reduced sound deadening a little bit annoying. When cruising at 8th gear and getting on the accelerator, sometimes you get this like low hum. I'm not sure if you can hear it. It's like it's a kind of an annoying sound sometimes, but anyone opting for the Carrera T as opposed to the base Carrera or a 4S, S, whatever, you kind of already know what you're getting into. So this is really just a nitpick. Other than that, this car is freaking awesome. It's really great as just a purist driver's car. It's plenty quick. The Porsche PDK is basically perfect, and it's fun. It's just so much fun. You know, I don't think many people are realizing how important this generation of 911 is, because this is likely going to be the last generation of 911 that has a pure flat 6-cylinder setup. Whatever comes next is likely going to have some sort of hybridization or electrical assist for the drivetrain. And while I'm sure those cars will be great to drive regardless, it's only going to get bigger and heavier from here on out. And so getting behind the wheel of a GT3 or a 911 Turbo instead, I'm sure it would have been great. But I truly appreciate the Carrera T for the many smiles per gallon, not because it's giving me a high-revving, naturally aspirated flat 6 or a 600-plus horsepower supercar killer experience, but because of the simple things.
A wise man once said, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." Or maybe it was a woman, I honestly don't remember, but I think that's the perfect way to describe this Carrera T. The focus here isn't necessarily on the sound or the horsepower or a crazy dinner table size wing, but the emotion, the feedback, the experience as a whole. And yes, for what Porsche is charging for this car, you could get an R8 or a new Z06, but I honestly don't think either car compares as a purist machine. In order of recording, this is the last sports car I'm reviewing for the year, and honestly, what a way to go out. Cars like this remind me of why I love my job, and now that I've figured out what the Carrera T is, I'm gonna go back to figuring out who the hell I am. Thanks for watching.